I'm Josh Sigman, and I'm a mortgage lender. I'm also a geek for money, not just earning it and saving it, but literally everything about it. I love that money has rules. It has its truths. I love investment strategies, and I love making money work for us. For so many, money is emotional. For me, it's logical, like a puzzle. My passion is also helping others with their money. I love looking at people's finances, dissecting their puzzle, and rebuilding with strategy and purpose, and I'm really good at it. I'm making this podcast about my money strategies, not the things that are written in books or sold in programs. It's a podcast outlining the lessons I've learned and used for the past 15 years. These strategies help me and those who use them save more, give more, create wealth, and retire early. Let me teach you how to build your net worth. You ready? Welcome to Sigman Sense. Welcome to another episode of Sigman Sense, and we're going to have a fun conversation today. It's not always pleasant to talk about, but it's a fun conversation, and what I want to really focus on today is, what the earliest thoughts are about money, about debt, about what savings is or isn't, because I know your story and you know mine, and I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's a big issue in America right now. I think that there's very little taught in the schoolyard, in middle school and high school, yes, about what to do, what not to do, what credit cards are, cash use, things like that.
It's and crazy. So when are they going to start teaching that stuff?
Yeah.
I think we should start teaching that too.
Well, hopefully this will start teaching some people.
Yes.
So since we both screwed up, because we were both, I know both of us were on the bad side of that thought process. Mm-hmm. What is the earliest, what's your earliest thoughts about credit in general? Credit cards, debt. What was your earliest thoughts about that? What can you remember?
I can remember being hedged away from them, like taught, don't go down that road. Don't go down that road until you have to, and then you be responsible with it. But that is really about it. Then in college, I had friends that were they would go and open up a credit card at every retail store imaginable because they didn't have any money. But Victoria's Secret, Express, all those stores would give you lines of credit, and then you can have all the fancy clothes and, maybe make the payment someday, maybe not. So I certainly did some of that. Dumb. Then the biggest thing was I got a letter in the mail from Bank of America where I was banking, and they had popped a credit card in there and said, here's a $10,000 line of credit. I was flattered and honored. Wow, that's really cool. Like,
I have cool stuff.
They
just give me money. You're kind of, it's like an endorsement deal. Is that what it is? Because if you get to carry around the certain handbags, they're going to sell more handbags.
It's like an influencer position. Yes, here, let's take this credit card. And I just remember thinking, wow, they must know that I make a lot of money bartending. Like, they must know. And so I totally took the bait and totally maxed that baby out. Not quickly, but it happened. I always made payments, which I think is what it's what kept me going, spending, because I was still making the payments, and I'm like, I'm good. I got this under control. I'm making payments. Nothing's late. You only have to make the minimum. It's a beautiful situation happening. And so that's not how it works. So it takes, so I did that, and then had to work all the way to pay that sucker down. And then I did it again, like 2 years later. Like, what is wrong with me? And
why do you think that is? You're certainly not the only one that's done that before.
It's insane.
It's our culture. For the most part, the United States for the last couple decades is a negative saving rate country, right? Mm-hmm. So it means that on average, people spend more than they have. Which only works if you have credit lines, right? Credit cards.
Yeah.
Why do you think that we're hardwired that way as a consumer country? Why do you think that is?
It's I want it, and I want it right now.
Which goes back to
want it
deferred
right now.
gratification
Yeah,
or not.
There's zero deferred gratification. Although I will say I have practiced deferred gratification, and as recent as I just got my first pair of AirPods for the ears.
The kids all know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, my
The
daughter has one.
wireless headphones. Yes. I've wanted them for a really long time. In fact, I didn't even buy them. Randy surprised me with them.
That's cool.
But people had been making fun of me because I've been talking about how I really want the wireless earpods, and they're like, "Go buy them." I'm like, but like I have headphones or earpods, whatever. I have some. I don't need these fancy ones. So, anyways, it is that everybody wants it right now. And we convince ourselves that we deserve it.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter.
Well, the
we'll
keeping up with the
later.
Joneses is a real deal, right? I remember there was a commercial. It's probably 10 years old now, but I remember this. It's a middle-aged white guy that's mowing a lawn in the front of a fancy neighborhood house, and like a colonial-style house. And he's got a big smile on his face, and what he's saying is, "I'm in debt up to my eyeballs." You remember that one?
I do remember that, actually.
And I remember laughing at it. And what the sick humor is that is most of America, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. Did I tell you how I got my first credit card?
No, but
Okay, this one's a good one.
Yeah.
So I'm back in college, and I go to spring break down to South Padre Island. I'm in South Padre Island with my buddies, and I didn't have a lot of clothes at the time. And this specific T-shirt I had on this day was filthy. We had gone out the night before. I'm not sure we went to sleep. We were back on the beach the next day. It was just a gnarly shirt that I had on. And I remember I'm walking down the beach, and there's these booths that are set up. And if you sign up for a credit card, then you get a free T-shirt.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm in for that. So not one, not two, but 4 T-shirts later, because that's all I was equating was 4 T-shirts. I had clean shirts for the rest of the trip, right?
There you go.
And I actually still have one of those credit cards, by the way. But
I still have one of the T-shirts that I signed up
do you
for.
really?
Yeah, all my credit cards didn't get hand delivered to my mailbox, but yeah, I still have one.
This is just predatory crap for kids. There's a reason why the bank set this stuff up on the beach when it's all spring break time. And what was even worse is my friends would teach me that, hey, because it's always the same thing, right? It's the bait is 0 interest for 6 months, right? And at the time, you were allowed to transfer. So the other credit cards were trying to gobble up the credit cards. So you would transfer your balance to a new credit card, which would be 0 payments for 6 months.
Oh.
So what I used to do is I'd charge it, and then I'd transfer the balance over to a new credit card, which had 0 payments for 6 months.
Wow.
And I was flipping and opening credit cards until I got up to about 16. So I had 16 credit cards. Yeah. And
would you continue using the one that you got rid of the balance on? Or is that
well,
just a way to...
at first, no.
Okay.
Right? The answer is at first, no.
Go big or go home.
Well, it goes back to one of the things that I think all people recognize is that if the limit is blank, you will eventually hit the limit.
Fact.
So the lower the limit is, the safer you are, which is something I want to teach my kids early. We talk about money already. My oldest is 12, youngest is 7. And I want them to have a better fundamental understanding of what money and credit are. But so here I am, I'm 19, 20, and 21, and I've got no business having 16 credit cards, but I've got them. And I haven't had to make a payment yet. And I was living out of cash because I was a bartender and server. So for the most part, I didn't use credit. But credit is supposed to be a tool. That's what it's supposed to be. It's one of 2 tools. It's a tool for convenience is one tool. It's a tool for emergencies. If you have no other options, would be another tool.
I had one of those
A
too.
third tool, right? A third tool that if you were to add a third one is if you're smart and you use it wisely, you can get perks.
Use the rewards,
Because
yeah.
right, the rewards. I literally my mom comes down every single year for Thanksgiving and for a kid's birthday. And she hasn't had to pay for a flight in probably 10 years.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah. And I need to start doing that. And see, I have literally deprived myself of a credit card because I don't trust myself. Like,
well, that's good. It's like a crackhead in a candy store. You don't want to.
It is. It's a thing. But I wanted to take a trip to North Carolina for something, and I really wish it was going to be a business trip, and I really would have liked to have some points to pay for the travel. And so maybe in our next budget meeting we can
talk about that.
Just like a baby balance, like a baby limit, like $500.
Right, just a baby one.
Because I can't be trusted.
Right. The whole idea behind it, though, is that if you start to understand what those are, well, one thing I love that you just said, because I don't think people regulate themselves well, is you know what your weakness is, and therefore you stay away from it, right? So I've been budgeting with you for years now, and I know that you have an account that's basically a prepaid card that once it goes zero balance, there is no more money.
Correct.
It's like credit card in reverse, right? Mm-hmm. Which is smart. It's basically a cash system, but with the convenience of credit, right?
Yes.
But the piece here is that when you give here's an example. There was I guess it was about 3 years ago, for Christmas, I wanted my kids to have the ability to help go buy their siblings and my wife gifts, right? Yeah. So you don't just say free reign, go pick something out and I'll buy it, because they'll get some weird stuff, inexpensive stuff, or just stupid stuff.
Right.
So we went to a Buc-ee's, and I gave them all $20, and I said, hey, all three of you guys have $20. Go pick out something to give each other. And what's interesting is they didn't want to break the $20 bill.
Oh,
right?
That's the worst.
So there's a visceral response to breaking it. That's why the cash systems, when you think about like a Dave Ramsey and the envelope system, that's why it works, is people don't want to break with their $100, or if the envelope is almost empty and it's 14 days before you can refill it, you start making better choices, because there's a visceral response to it, which credit cards eliminate, right?
Yes.
That's why if you go
to the convenience factor.
Right. Well, that's also why if you go to a casino, do you play with money?
No.
What do you play with?
Chips.
Because why?
Because it's play money.
It's play money. It's not real. It's monopoly money.
Not real.
So we have no problem splashing the pot with all this play money, because it's not real money. Yeah. It's a token. It's a chip. A credit card is the same thing, and that's why we are all weaker when it comes to just swiping. We make poor decisions, right? And so when you really think about that, if you don't have the self-control, you've got to do a couple of things. Either A, don't use credit cards at all. B, set the limit as low as possible. So I get the need these days, especially since a lot of people commute 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, one way or the other, that you might need to have a credit card for $500 or $1,000 for what happens if I blow out 2 tires and I have no money. I need to be able to fix my tires so I can keep on working, right? Or if you're on a trip, a vacation, whatever, the last thing you want to do is be stuck somewhere and you not have the ability to get a hotel room if you're stuck, something like that. But outside of that, for the most part, credit is not good for 90% of the world.
Right.
And I'm giving a weird number, but based on my experience of looking at people's credit reports, most people mismanage the use of credit cards, the use of credit.
It's right? Because you only have to make that low minimum payment.
Yep.
Which is reasonable.
Yep.
Right. And then, like I said earlier, I felt like flattered that they would give me a $10,000 credit line.
Now I'm a big girl.
But I think people too are like, the credit line that is extended makes you feel good. It's like, I've arrived. Look what, because it's based off of income or status. I don't know. So I think that's part of it too, right? Like, but yeah, so they are mismanaged.
Well, here's something. It's a good rule to learn. It's a rule I learned back in finance class years ago, but it's called the rule of 72. And the rule of 72 is something that can work for you or work against you, right? And so one thing that I'm acutely aware of is the power it can work against you. So what I mean by this is 72 divided by whatever the rate of return is how fast it'll take your money to double. So if we're looking from a positive light, if I've got $1,000 in the bank and I invest it in the stock market, and the stock market that for the next couple of years averages a 10% rate of return, then 72 divided by 10 means that every 7.2 years, my money doubles. So my $1,000 turns into $2,000. My 2,000 turns into 4,000. So that rule of 72 is a good thing to understand of about how long will it take to retire. I can back into how much money do I need to have for it to double based on rate of return. It's a good thing to know. What people don't apply the rule of 72 towards, which I think would help them with their spending habits, is it works the same way against you, right? So let's go back to my credit cards that I flip, no payments, 0 interest. The small print though is that when the payments do come due, if you miss it, it goes from 0 interest to like 24. At least that's what it was back in my era, right? So now if you divide 72 by 24, right, then you're talking about every 3 years, you're paying for that shirt again.
Oh my gosh.
You're paying for that purse again. You're paying for that trip again. So when you start thinking about, like, it drives me nuts. Christy, I love you. There are some dresses in our closet.
Dresses in your closet?
Dresses in the closet, not for me. Thanks for pointing that out.
Sure.
Just on Saturdays. There's some dresses in the closet that still have a price tag on it. So I know it's never been worn before, right? And I know that women do this. I know that they you go pick out 2 things. I don't know what I'm going to wear. So but now there's this thing. Now it's one thing if you buy it in cash and it's out of the budget and you've got a budgeted allocation for how much you're going to spend on yourself because you deserve it, whatever that is, if it fits the budget, right? But let's say a different example, because for sure my wife was buying it with cash. But let's say what if somebody in college had a dance coming up and they swiped that credit card for 2 $200 dresses, right?
Her name is Brynn. Her name is Brynn.
I wasn't going to call you out. And then, of course, you wore one of them, right?
Yeah.
And then you just forgot to take the other one back where, I'll wear that one someday.
Yeah.
And now it's on credit. And like you said, the payments are palatable. So it's only $50, $30. I'm a bartender. I can pay that $50 and keep floating that balance. But what's happening, because you're carrying the balance, you're paying for that. But depending on your interest rate on the credit card, you're paying for that dress that you never wore in the first place every couple of years again.
Crazy to think.
And so what's weird is when I learned that early on, and I finally understood that, holy crap, by carrying a balance, half the stuff I bought I don't even have anymore. I certainly don't remember that meal that I paid for. I pooped it out 24 hours later, right?
We're eating and drinking our money.
Right, eating and drinking our money and pooping it out, and that's what's happening. And then you get to pay for your poop. Like, again, I mean, it's the craziest thing when you think about it, what carrying a balance is if you don't operate it like a tool.
Right.
Right? So if you cannot pay off your credit card balance, not the payment, the balance every single month, you have too much debt. You need to chop up your credit cards. You need to decrease your limit. You need to seriously work on getting that down.
The other thing we didn't talk about as far as credit cards being a tool or credit in general is how it applies to mortgages. You know, I mean, that's
a good point. That's a good point.
As far as mortgages go, those credit cards or credit lines boost your score.
Or they don't.
Yeah.
Right? Some basic rules there. You know, it's interesting, right? So let's say you did make good choices. Again, this is lack of education in the general public. So you made good choices. You never opened up a credit card at all. Mm-hmm. You saved some money. It was cash savings because you're a bartender. Yep. So literally, we don't get to qualify for having any income because it was all cash. And you've never, and even though you've paid everything with cash, you've never established credit through the credit agencies. Yeah. So you're the good kid that I can't give a mortgage to, right? So you have to have some credit to establish a credit score. Okay. Now, credit scores when it comes to credit cards is interesting too. So longevity is one of them. So remember I said earlier, one of those credit cards I have back in college, I still have. It's got a zero balance. I literally never use it. When they send me a credit card, I chop it up and throw it away. Okay. It's literally just because I've had it for 20 years now. Oh. So that the fact that I've got a credit limit open for literally 20 years is helping my credit score. Okay.
Even with no balance, huh?
Even with no balance, or very little. Every once in a while, it's my Capital One. It's my Capital One card that you're aware of.
The one that I have.
Yeah. So every once in a while, there'll be a couple $100 on it, and then we pay it off. Yeah. It's literally for my other credit card doesn't work scenario. That's literally all it is. That one, yeah. So that's one element. The second element is what is the balance compared to the credit limit.
Yes,
right?
This is a big one.
Right. So there's a dangerous game, right? You want to reduce your limit because you don't want to spend too much that you get into the dark hole that you can never get out of, right? But you don't want to spend up to the limit either. So general rules of thumb, you don't want to ever really exceed 50% of the limit as a credit. So what that means is if you have a $1,000 credit card, you never want to spend more than about $500 in a month and then pay it off, right? Because if your limit is greater than 50%, greater than 70%, greater than 30%, 30, 50, 70 basically, certainly limited out. Every tier that you hit, the credit scores go down, even if you're paying it off each month. So now you're balancing that element. because you're, are you mismanaging your money? Do you have the ability to? The credit limits themselves, if you think about it intuitively, if you have a $100,000 credit card, what the credit agencies know, what banks know is eventually it's, you have the potential of having this extra $100,000 debt out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, slow paying, no pays will crush your credit. So
I think
the discipline of that.
The two hardest hits on your credit are mortgages and credit cards. Missed payments on a mortgage or a credit card.
Separate of public records, like separate of if you did a foreclosure or bankruptcy or collection, right? Separate of public record. Yeah, you're right.
As far as payments missed.
Yes.
So typically, correct me if I'm wrong, once you miss a mortgage payment, once it's recorded, or a credit card payment, like 100 points, boom, hit.
Yeah, a late payment on a mortgage can be 100, 150 points, just like that, or more. Right. I mean, if you were 800 credit score, you're for sure in the 600s or 500s, overnight.
And then the only way to rebuild or repair from there is time. 12 months without another missed payment.
And it's not even a fixed number. Your credit scores will recover over time. The longer the time, 6 months later, it's a little bit better. A year later, it's a little better. 3 years later, it's a little better. But it could take years to get back if you don't have the discipline to even pay it on time, which is why people do, auto draft, which then kind of circulates the problem because you don't feel the pain of the money leaving your hands because you swiped it and then it paid itself, and you lose touch with reality of what's coming into your bank account and what's leaving your bank account. So it kind of perpetuates the problem, right? Now we don't even need credit cards anymore, right? We've got Apple Pay. Why do I need a credit card? I can just swipe my phone over it.
I know. And here's the thing. I don't want to set that up.
Nope.
And my phone literally will not stop reminding me.
Yep.
I'm like,
over and over and over.
Stop. Because it says I haven't finished setting up my phone.
Yeah. Well, how about in-app purchases?
Terrible.
I mean.
That's a whole, that's like a episode. That was
a bad day.
That was a bad day for Josh.
I'll share that story. It's actually, I forgot about that. You started laughing. I remembered.
What time is it?
So
what time is it?
Right. I'll make it a 3-minute story. This is
a good one.
Well, parents out there, listen clearly.
Yeah, also a PSA.
Yeah, this is a public service announcement for sure. So, yes, if you don't know it, there are in-app purchases. I'm an idiot. I did not know this. Okay. So what that means is that even if you buy a game for a kid and it's a free game, if you don't have certain controls set up on your phone, then the kid can purchase using the already set up credit card that you have tied to your Apple account or whatever. And so I do read my credit card statements and I do look at my bank statements. And a couple years back, my dear loving daughter, who's 12, was at the time probably 5. And I remember I got this credit card. Well, first of all, my credit card maxed out, which never happens. And so that was the first indicator. So then I opened up my statement and looked at it. And I was mad at Apple because Apple was screwing me. They were charging all sorts of crazy stuff. It was only $5 here, $5 there, but the $5.
They were line itemed.
Oh, it was line item.
Okay.
Yep. All these iTunes purchases to the tune of $12,000. $12,000. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, so I called my wife up at first and I was like, hey baby, have you been buying stuff? Like, are you buying CDs? Are you buying music? Like, are you creating a music?
Like, what can we buy?
Like, what's fine? Like, what are you doing on Apple, like iTunes? Cause it was a new concept to me. I didn't understand what's happening. So she's like, no babe, I haven't done any of that. And I was like, okay. So then I call iTunes to find out that all these purchases were $2.99 to $7 things. My daughter was dressing her Barbie with imaginary clothes.
This is the best.
So there's literally
just to add fuel to the fire.
Oh, dude. So not only do not have the Barbie, not only do not have the Barbie clothes, we're paying for this. And by the way, she's never looked at that app probably in 10 years, right?
Right.
But there was $12,000 of crap that was charged by click, 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 click.
Homegirl's got a wardrobe.
That Barbie is dressed, right? I wonder which Barbie it was. I need to go back and look at it. But it's bizarre,
bad.
But you think about it. How about most people have the ability, if they're still wired in with cable, a kid can go buy a $5 movie for the night.
Yeah.
Click, click, doesn't, like, you don't even know. And if you don't check your credit card and you don't line item look at it, the credit card, you can't get pissed about it. And I use that word because you got to at some point get a visceral reaction. When you pay, even if you can pay the balance in full, and you realize that you just spent $1,500 or $3,000 in a month in credit card, and you got to ask yourself, what do I have? What do I actually still have that's worth $3,000?
What can I hold in my hand?
Right. What most of Americans do is they don't have anything to show for it. It wasn't an improvement project on their house. It wasn't buying a collector's item that's going to go up in value. It was, we ate it, we drank it, we experienced it, or we kept up with the Joneses, and it's going to be out of style in 6 months anyways.
Right. And nor do they want to face the reality of that conversation with themselves.
Oh, dude.
Because
and then
it sucks.
Well, and how about if it's not with themselves? What if they are actually the saver and they want to have the conversation, but then their spouse is the spender, or the emotional control that comes with who's the primary breadwinner? And is it fair to even have that? You make all the money. Can I really limit your spending? Right. Or the flip side.
Or, I make all the money. Sure, I agree to these rules, but I'm going to break them whenever I want.
Right.
Because, I make all the money.
I deserve it.
And I deserve it.
And that becomes an issue in and of itself.
And I think those are all things that we continue to unfold, which is where the idea of the money podcast in and of itself maybe not be that sexy and exciting, but legit, there's so many great things that come from it as far as the emotions and the relationships and the psychology and all of that, which is super cool. So,
well, let's wrap up the credit side of things.
So I want to talk, and then the rule of 72, right?
Yeah. So 72 is that good rule that we talked about earlier. But when it really comes down to credit, let's go back to, how can you use it for good in the event that you can control your habits, right? Or how do you at least educate your kids or educate yourself or try to make a change, right? The first job is to get the debt to zero, right? How you do that is something that's a budgeting idea that I learned years ago, because I get asked the question all the time, Josh, you just said that every extra dollar went towards debt reduction. Would I actually advise that? No. Knowing what I know now, by just using what I had to live, by just paying my rent, by just paying for food, and that was it, and my car payment at the time, my student loans at the time, and dumping every extra dollar, I'm just really lucky that I didn't have an emergency. I'm just really lucky that I didn't have a four tires blowout. I'm just really lucky that there wasn't a catastrophic event, because I had nothing to dip back into, because I left nothing in the bank. I literally took every extra dollar and dumped it towards debt reduction, right?
And had you learned that yet?
I hadn't learned that yet. It was just I knew I wanted to be out of debt, and so I was going to do whatever it took. Right. So what one of my mentors named Rick taught me was this idea of a float account. And it's really important to have a float account, because what a float account is 3 to 9 months, so average 3 to 9 months of reserves in cash in a savings account or money market account that is in the event of emergency, right? This is the, we hope we don't crash the airplane, but underneath your seat, there's a flotation device. That's what a float account is.
And it's 3 to 9 months of your
survival number,
not your income.
Correct. So
the
survival number is defined as what are the minimum payments that you have to pay each month to live for you, for your lifestyle. So this is not a food, water, shelter conversation, but if your kid's in private school, you still should have a few months of, unless you're willing to jerk your kid out of private school, you have a few months of that. But for sure, it's your mortgage, it's for sure your rent, it's for sure your car payment, the minimum payments in your credit cards, a budget allowance based on your average food bill, gas bill, incidentals, whatever that minimum is that you're like, I could tighten the strings and do this, 3 to 6 months of that. I like 6 months. If you're a small business owner, it needs to be 9 to 12 months. It's got to be higher if you're a small business owner.
Separate account.
Yeah, separate account. Absolutely. Account. This is a float account, because now.
Let me clarify that. You said for a business owner.
Small business owner. All I'm saying is you're at a higher risk, because if you are an employee, the reality is you're going to get that check every month that you can rely on. So you don't need as much in your float account as long as you thought through your survival. Right? And as long as you thought your job was stable. Let's add that in. But if you're a small business owner, usually the poop hits the fan all at the same time. So right about the time that there's an emergency at home is right about the time that the business is not going well. So you should have a float account for your business and a float account for yourself.
That's what I was getting at.
Separate.
So your business account should have 9 to 12 months worth of survival, while your personal should have.
And this is I've become a conservative person when it comes to this stuff, but the element is like I know for sure that to get away from the fear, the emotion around money, there's got to be a comfort blanket, right or wrong, that's there in case of emergency, right? And so how you get there is a question, because most people do not have, based on my mortgage experience, most people do not have 3 to 6 months of money in the bank, period, right? So the way that you get there then, and what I was saying earlier is I dumped all money into debt reduction. I wouldn't do that. I'd take 50% of my leftover money after I pay my bills. 50% I would put into a float account. 50% I would put into debt reduction. So for easy numbers, let's just say that the household income is $4,000. And let's say this is after taxes, so just for easy numbers. So 4,000. Let's say it took $2,000 to pay everything. Pay my rent, pay my electricity, all that stuff, okay? And I've got $2,000 left over. Then what I would want to do is put $1,000 into my float account to start building that up at the same time as I was putting $1,000 against debt. The reason is that once I get that float account up, now I can put all extra money towards debt reduction, because in the event of the poop hits the fan, I ran over, all 4 tires blew up, kid's sick, I've got a big deductible I've got to pay or whatever, I don't go back and dip in the credit that I'm trying to pay down, which is super discouraging. Instead, I reach into my float account, pay it out of that. That's the only thing it's there for in case of emergency. And I go right back into splitting, moving forward, add back in my float account, add back into debt reduction. But my debt didn't go up. It didn't go up. So that's how you get ahead. And it could be people, I threw out the number 1,000. I understand most people don't have the ability to choose what to do with $2,000. That's a real honest answer, right? Yeah. I don't care if it's $400. If you have $400 left over at the end of the month, take $200, set it aside into a float account, take $200, do debt reduction, because it starts somewhere. And where I see why most people don't save, or most people don't start working on the debt reduction is, what's $100 going to do? Exactly. Like $100 savings will not make me retire. $100 of debt reduction against my 10,000, that's like going to do nothing. Yeah. But it is. It's a start. It's a habit. It's a way to move forward. And we'll get into laws of compounding interest, things like that later.
Yeah. Well, and I always think, we've talked a lot about bartending and waiting tables. Hey, you get enough $2 tips, you're going to end up with a wad of cash.
That's the truth.
So it doesn't.
You can't go broke making a profit.
You just can't. Yep. You just can't. So as far as the money market, the float account goes, these are basically checking account type or savings account type accounts, right? They're not
checking, in my opinion. For sure it's not stocks, right. But it's got to be something that's out of hand, right? So meaning there's a lot of online banks that you can do that it takes a day. So in 24 hours I can get the money, but it takes a transfer. So I've got to go into my account. I've got to transfer the money from that money market account to my checking account so that I can spend it.
Right.
But it takes the thought. It removes the ability. If I'm in a store, I'm like, oh, that's pretty. I want to buy that.
Let me pull up my app.
I can't just go spend the money right then, which means that maybe it is something you want to buy, but at least you have to think about it for a day. And if you still go back a day later, so be it. But there's got to be that separation. That float account should be out of hand, but available.
Okay.
So it's not a CD. Takes 6 months to get. It's not a stock market. It's not a bond. It's nothing like that. It's a savings account or a money market account that's separate of instantaneous access.
Okay. And so just a low earning interest money.
It's not about growing wealth, right? This is your comfy blanket. That's all it is.
And then when you say debt reduction, where do you start? Is there a plan for that?
Great question. So this is where I fundamentally disagree with some of these big programs out there that say pay off the lowest payment first. Or the lowest balance first, and then like the debt snowball. Right. It works for millions of people, so I'm not going to say it's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. Doing something, having a plan, and executing is great.
It's great.
Okay,
but this is your podcast.
But mathematically, I would tell you that you pay off the highest interest rate first. Period. End of story. Okay. So if the highest interest rate is 19% and it's got the biggest balance, and you've got another one that's $1,000 balance, but it's got a 5% interest rate, you pay off the 19 first. You start chipping away at the stuff that, going back to the rule of 72, is going to cost you the fastest, right? So that's where you start, is take that half your money, put into float, Take half your money, apply it towards the highest interest rate debt, lowest term debt, right? That's another piece of it. Meaning if it's paid over 10 years versus over a year, the lowest term has the highest payment, right?
Okay,
so the highest interest rate, shortest term is what you put it towards first.
Okay.
That's non-tax deductible. There is some interest in certain things that are tax deductible we can get into later. But
nice.
it's a starting point, and we'll get more into the next steps in the future.
The next steps. Credit cards, Law of 72.
Law of 72. Don't screw it up because it will cost you
thousands of dollars for the dress in the closet. No, I love it.
No more T-shirts on the beach, okay?
No more T-shirts on the beach. You're not a Bank of America influencer when they send you the credit card. That's not how it works.
That's
Awesome. Very cool. Cheers.
Next time.
Next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.